Okay, well, I'm just going to start for everybody that was here, and as people come, they will just join in. So we are on our last session of paraprofessional training, the student engagement piece, and we are so glad that you are here. Those of you that have survived all 6 of our or 5 previous and now 6 sessions, we're very happy you're here. So let's get started on student engagement. Click. So today what we're going to talk about is the principles of student engagement and its relationship to making students successful. We'll talk about some instructional practices that you can use to support student engagement and some learning styles, abilities, and interests that you and the students have to encourage them to be engaged. Ding. As always, here is the link to the Padlet. If there's anybody new, you can either use the link or the QR code, which will take you to all sorts of resources that we have on the Padlet. And if you haven't looked at it yet, feel free, and you can use anything, share it, print it, whatever you want to do with it. If you find something that you think is really useful as a para, if you send it to one of us, either myself, Alana, Niki, Elisa, or Katie, we can add it to the Padlet. So it's definitely somewhere you can go back to periodically just to see what new information might have been added. Ding. Again, I know you've heard this before, but all students are general education students first. That is our mantra. And all students have to be given, must be given access to the general ed curriculum. And that's what we strive for. That's what we help teachers do. That's what paraprofessionals help with, because we have to educate students in the least restrictive environment. And sometimes that means they need some help or some accommodations. And we can't say it enough how important paraprofessionals are for making that happen. You are an invaluable resource for teachers and schools and students. So in the chat box, let us know how you know when a student is engaged in academic content. You can go ahead and put it in the chat.
Wasn't there. She learned.
Okay, Kelly, when they're asking questions, absolutely.
You just said there weren't any fingerprints on that. It's not on the outside of the hand. No.
Anything else?
You can have a hat. She probably does so long, you don't even.
Students nod while the teacher is talking. Yep. Anything else?
There's something in the chat that says willing, Lauren said willing to raise their hand independently. So raising their hand and.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely great. Oh, yep, they can answer questions that other students ask. Those are all really good answers. All right, click. Engage with responses such as echoing or skywriting. Absolutely. Those are really good answers. You really know what to look for to see student engagement. All right, there's 2 kinds of engagement, which can be defined as active engagement or passive engagement. So some of the things that you said would be active, right? Asking questions and are responding. That is active. The student is actively engaged if they are asking questions or completing a task or responding to a task. If they're attentive, so they're not actually responding, but they're obviously paying attention. They're not distracted during instruction, then they are passively engaged. And truthfully, either way is engagement, which is what we want. So we have kind of a double screen here, where collaboration, if they're collaborating with peers, if they're applying content to real world experiences, if they have increased opportunities to respond, which we will talk about later in this presentation, those are examples of when a student is engaged. If they are on their technology, if they are just trying to work for a reward, if they are if you're paying for programs and materials that you just think are going to work, but kids aren't really working on them, then that is not engagement. And I think one of the biggest problems teachers have is that technology piece, where if kids aren't engaged, they're on their phones, they're trying to get into programs on their computers that they might not be supposed to be on, to play games or whatever that looks like, is when they are not engaged. Next. So we have different domains, I guess you would call them, of engagement. You have a behavioral piece where they're participating, their attendance is good, they're attentive. So we always say if kids are engaged, they don't have time to misbehave. So they are actively participating in whatever lesson is happening. There is that emotional engagement where they feel like they can ask questions, where they belong to the class, where their attitude is positive, and they just are willing to participate, right or wrong, with the answers, because they know it's a safe space and they can learn in that space. Next. So how do we engage students effectively? We first have to be explicit and make sure that the students understand why they are learning something. That is the why. We've all heard that kid, well, I don't know why I have to learn this. So it's being able to connect what they are learning with the why, or how they might use that in the future. So it has to be, the instruction has to be explicit. The ability of a student to engage as an active learner, not just sit and get, like you are doing now. But as you know, when we do trainings, we usually have activities and different ways to participate, which is a better way to be an engaged learner than just sit and get. And I will say that sometimes high school teachers have a harder time with it. It seems like the older you get, the more sit and get you get, instead of actually engaging in the activities as a learner. They will be a receptacle of knowledge. They just need to do it in a way where they're engaged with the content. And they need an opportunity to receive feedback on what they're doing. Now, it can't always be positive, but the more you can catch them on the positive and build that student confidence, it increases the probability that a student will be successful. So trying to find the positive in what students are doing and giving feedback on, instead of going, oh, it's wrong. Because that also leads to where kids will stop asking questions. They just will stop doing things if they think they're just going to get it wrong. So trying to find the positive, trying to build that confidence, that support of great question, that just will snowball. Success breeds success. So the student sees more success, they're going to be more engaged, and it just will grow from there. So, okay, in one of the problems that we had when we were all on remote learning was students, again, it was sit and get, it was more passive. There wasn't a feeling of belonging to a group. I mean, we are a group here, but it's a little harder to act like a group than if we were in person and we could walk amongst you and we could interact with you that way. And students felt disengaged. And I know it's a little hard to see, but if you look at the pie graphs, it gives you information on the motivation and the morale in that 2021 school year that was student self-reported and then the teacher's view. And you can see it was difficult for students to feel engaged and feel like they belonged. Okay. Next, I think. Yeah. So go
sorry.
ahead.
I wanted to make sure it went forward for you, Gail. Sorry, because it went forward fast for me, but then it didn't seem like you saw it. Sorry.
Yeah, it didn't go for a minute and then it,
Okay.
I don't know. So in the chat, kind of share what have you noticed over time about student motivation and morale from after they came back from those online years.
I think what's so interesting about this study is that they did studies on how the students felt about their motivation and morale and what teachers noticed about, student motivation and morale. But those of you who are paraprofessionals, when those students came back over the last few years from the COVID experience, I just wonder, what have you noticed about as paras? You work most closely with some of our neediest students. How are you getting them back into the game here, motivating them, building that morale among students? What patterns have you noticed?
Oh yeah, definitely less motivated and want answers to just be given to them. Yeah, and I think that one of the things that is kind of hard to do in a Zoom when you have kids is that being able to ask the questions instead of just getting the answer. Because asking questions is a difficult skill because there's a lot of things that go on with asking a question. You have to know what your question is and be able to verbalize what your question is. You have to know when to ask and who to ask. And I think that sometimes with the online, when they were online, is that for one thing, body language is harder to read when you're online because it's easy to turn off a camera. So I don't know if Taylor's just getting upset over everything because I can't see. And so, or I think that just knowing, so when kids came back in person, they just want to do the work. So that was a really good response. What else do we have? Can anybody see the chat, Alana?
I can.
Let me
Let's see. It says, I just put right when we came back from online learning, it seemed that most things moved from in person, like talking to each other. It was like they just used their Chromebooks more, but they were in person, but they still were using their technology more because we had to adapt and change it to online. So teachers had a hard time going back. Then they just did what they knew for that long. So it was less collaborative and more talking with our computer, even though we were back in person. That's what I noticed.
Yeah. Computers can be a real asset to different things, but sometimes we need that personal connection. And again, you can learn a lot from your peers. Anything else? All right, Alana.
So we're going to talk about practices that support engagement. Now we talked about motivation was a little bit lower. So how can we, as paraprofessionals, support our teachers in the classroom? We're going to talk about some engagement strategies. So if you want to look on here, it depends on, and I always think this is interesting as an adult learner, and as we talk, Gail calls it sit and get. But as an adult learner, we only have 15 to 18 minutes of appropriate direct instruction. So only for 15 to 18 minutes that we can pay attention. So let's think about like a lecture or something. So we're listening to information, and as an adult learner, 15 to 18 minutes, and that's it. Then I get distracted. And if you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, it's been about 15 minutes, but we actually stopped and asked you some questions because we want to get you involved. Because if we just sat and Gail talked for the first 15 to 18 minutes without any breaks, it would be hard for you to stay engaged, right? So that is hard, but I don't know if you guys do K through 2, 3 to 5, or 6 through 8. I was 6 through 8, so I thought this was interesting. 6 through 8 is the appropriate duration of direct instruction is 12 to 18 minutes. And that means the teacher's talking like a model, she's modeling That's as long as you should do it. You shouldn't lecture the whole entire class. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that in the chat, where you taught and where you think. Do you think that it's probably more or less? This is from the source. It could be even changing now. This is 2005, but the direct instruction I thought was interesting. So kindergarten through 2 is 5 through 8 minutes. 5 minutes is about as much as they can watch, and then they're going to need, they can't, they're going to have a break. They're going to have to talk to each other. They're going to have to do something else. So I thought this chart was kind of interesting to look at. As a middle school teacher, I was in the 12 to 15 minutes. And I think that, and if I was planning a lesson, my stations would not go over probably 12 minutes because of this information. So this is just good information to know about how you teach those adult learners or the high school students, how long they can keep on a task versus a little kindergartner, to remember that when your student is in a lecture class, that might be really hard for them to pay attention to that lecture. So as a paraprofessional, maybe you can give them a paper so they can doodle while the teacher's talking. Maybe you can give them some scaffolded notes so they can fill something in while the teacher's talking, because you have to give them something else to do to be able to stay engaged, especially in that lecture type setting. I always think about social studies, or maybe the teacher that's talking a lot about something. If the student doesn't have anything to keep them on task, it's really hard for them to keep engaged this whole entire time. So that's kind of what I think. Even if they wanted to do a picture of what the teacher's talking about, just doodle a picture. I'm gonna give my student this paper. I'm gonna have them just doodle it so that they can have something else to do, because it's really hard for them to keep that direct instruction, that attention for that long if it goes over. And I know as a paraprofessional, you can't tell the teacher to stop talking, or you can't do that kind of stuff, but you can give some strategies to students to help them with these appropriate duration of direct instruction time.
And I'll just add that that can also come in handy when you are working with students that on stations, because it's often that independent station where students, if a third to fifth grader, if you start to get near the 12-minute mark, you're going to have lost some of them. And so, like Alana said, giving them some ideas of or reminders of what they can do if they finish or they're done, in order to keep them engaged until the time is up.
And then Maggie noted in the chat that doodle bookmarks fit nicely in the margin of guided notes. So if students have a guided note and then there's a part for them to doodle on task or off task, we know that it's helpful for them to stay engaged. So yeah, so those are some things that the paraprofessionals can help the teacher and the students. If you notice your students are having a hard time being engaged, give them some strategies like that, and that is a great tool for them. Thank you, Gail, too. Thank you for adding that to the chat. Inclusive active learning encourage participation. So setting goals and monitor and celebrating progress. So if you're at the beginning of a lesson and you're learning about PEMDAs and you're like telling your student, what is our goal today? What do we want to do by the end of class today? And maybe the student doesn't really know. And you say, okay, we don't know anything about PEMDAs. That's, an order of operations. If we can get 2 steps of this, you're going to be successful today. So if you set your goal at first, and by the end of the class, the student reaches that goal, you're going to celebrate that success and that progress. That is what encouraging a participation is, like an example of that. Make learning meaningful. Gail talked about that. You need to make connections, reasons behind your learning. We don't care about the what until we know about the why. You guys were not coming here until you knew the topic of it today, right? Your students say, what are we doing today? But really what they want is, why are we doing this today? They say, what are we doing today? What questions are we doing? But they really want to know why we're doing it. So anytime we can do that, Gail talked about that. What are the reasons between why are they having to learn that? Make learning doable. Access to the curriculum and organization. So students have to, of course, let's just say that they have to do a paragraph about summarizing the chapter of a book. And some of the students can tell it to you, and some of them can write it down. So if we're making it doable, and maybe some of the students can tell you what the summary of the book is, but they're not able to write it yet, we're still able to have them access that curriculum by telling it to you, or maybe making a video about it. So making sure that we know that we can remove some of those barriers for their students will help them increase their active learning in your classroom. Ensuring student success, errorless learning. That means that a teacher is going to model something all the way through. I'm going to do it on my own. I'm not going to ask for your input, because if I ask for your input and you get it wrong, then all the class can see that they got it wrong, right? So when you're modeling it for the student, even as a paraprofessional, if you're going to model it again, you could do that with errorless learning. So you're going to do that yourself, and you're not going to have them help you until you know that they understand it, and then you can help them through that. So that's what that one means too. So that will all help your active learning, all of those parts. And please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. So why are we doing these opportunities to respond? It's going to increase our academic achievement. We're going to improve behavior. We're going to talk about mental wellness. That means that I belong in this class. My teacher wants me to be there tomorrow. She's going to ask questions, and she's going to expect me to answer those questions. She cares that I'm there. So we all have access to that. So that's really helpful for our students being in our classroom. Research supports the importance of OTRs. That's what opportunities to respond are. Anytime we ask a question and give them a chance to answer us, and feedback. Opportunities to respond at a rate of 3 per minute, associated with significantly higher rates of active engagement and lower rates of student disruption. That's music to our ears, right? If they're engaged with us as the teacher or with each other, they're not bothering other students, they're not hitting, they're not acting out, but they're going to be more on task because we're going to give them involved in our classroom. So the more opportunities to respond, the better all of these will make us. And we're going to give some concrete examples of some. So using the chat, before we had this, we're going to kind of talk about a goal and how familiar are you with OTRs? So before you came to this webinar today, are you 0, you haven't heard of it at all? Are you 5, you're an expert on the topic and you'll research it and you know how to implement it? I'm going to let you have some time in the chat to think about that. When I use this is an opportunity to respond right here, this whole thing, this chart. I use this as a cell phone. So 0, you have 0 bars, you don't have any bars. To 5, you have all the bars of your cell phone use. Students in middle school know what that is. So if I would introduce a topic, whatever it would be, I would say, how familiar are you with order of operations? How familiar are you with inferencing? Whatever the topic was. 0, you have no cell phone bars to 5, and all the way in between. And then my students would have to put their hands up in the air and they'd give me a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that would be my pre-assessment as the teacher to see where we are on the topic. So if I did this with you and you did this in the chat, I don't see anyone yet, and it's okay, you can put anything that you want, but this is an OTR. So this is me giving you a chance to, the whole class, that's how I would do it. I would pose a question to the class and I would get a 0 to a 5 answer. And whatever it was, it's not graded. I'm just curious on your knowledge, your background knowledge of it. So Maggie is a 5, so that's awesome. So she's an expert. So if I had a mix, like if I'm at a webinar and let's just say I had 50 people, you would get a good feel of the group, of where you want to start and where you want to focus your energy. And as a teacher, that's what you do with your students too. And as a paraprofessional, that's what you do with your students too. How comfortable do you feel with this material right now? 0, you're not comfortable at all. To 5, you think you got it. To anywhere in between. That's something you could ask your students when making a goal. Right now at the beginning of class with adding mixed numbers, you are at a 0. At the end of this class, I want to get to a 1. I just want to move up 1. That is making a goal and getting to there. Make little steps. Anytime you could do that as a paraprofessional with your students, that's so helpful for your kids because it releases that dopamine and they're gonna work harder for you. Great. And Elisa put 4. Thanks. So this is just an idea for you to use this. You can change the topic, you can change what you're talking about, and you can use it with your students as a paraprofessional to your kids. Thanks, Kelly. That's perfect.
I wanted to add, Alana, that I worked with a para recently who told me that she started using these as like a secret sign with her students. So she was in the classroom more specifically for 4 students who had IEPs, and she would have them just kind of give like a secret signal of 0 to 5. When a teacher was done with a model, how comfortable are you kind of practicing this, with the group versus should I hang out in this group with you a little bit until you're comfortable? And it would never be that the para had to go specifically talk to that student. They were able to give them that independence, but that student would be able to give like a 5 saying, I'm good, give me some space, or I'm still feeling really confused, and the para would know if she saw one to kind of stay closer to that group for questions. So I thought that was a really great use. I had a para share with me last week.
I love that. I hope that when you guys can do that in your classroom, I think that's a great idea. It's a great strategy. Yes. The fist to five hand signals. Yeah, so did I. That's how I used it too. Perfect. So I appreciate you guys writing in the chat. And then if you don't know what an OTR, so today is an opportunity to respond. So at least you know what that is. They are important because they increase academic achievement. And how do we use them? I was trying to do this today as I gave you guys those questions. I was trying to use wait time. We have to use wait time. Sometimes teachers, including myself, will say a question and they'll want to answer it because it's uncomfortable silence, right? You have to wait for a few seconds. Even when I'm using the chat here, I know that you guys will answer eventually. Maybe you're in the car and you can't right away or whatever it is, but I have to give wait time before I ask for an answer. So if I'm at the front of the classroom and I'm doing a math problem and I'm writing the math problem, I've seen a classroom like this, and I'm modeling the class, and then the second one, or I'm having a bell ringer and I'm like, okay, everybody write your answers on your own worksheets, and then somebody's gonna raise their hand and they're gonna solve it for me. I've seen this in class. And so I model it and then we do them together and then we're bell ringer. And then one student raises their hand right away and I don't give anybody else a chance to finish their responses. I just ask the student that always has his hands raised to solve the question. That's not giving any wait time. I need to make sure that I'm asking everybody to get some time because some people learn differently and they process differently. And we really have to wait that uncomfortable silence. So that give a 30-minute or 30 seconds of silence or a minute of silence. And then when everybody gets a chance to write it down, then I'm going to look at everybody's responses before I'm going to ask the question. I'm ask for an answer. I'm not just going to ask the same students all the time. So that's what I really need to do. I need to plan my explicit instruction, planning my modeling. I'm going to provide opportunities to practice it. So we're going to practice all the time, provide opportunities for feedback, which Nikki is going to talk about. And I'm going to differentiate my questioning in my classroom for students. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to ask concrete questions, some higher level questions. I know some students, have a hard time with those higher level questions. So I'm going to have different kinds of questions ready so that everybody can respond in their own way. That is another thing that I'm going to do. So as a para, that was a great strategy, Nikki. You're going to get some opportunities to respond from your students. You're going to get feedback from them, and you're going to be able to help them based on that scale. And they don't even have to tell you, but you know that scale before. So you're going to teach those students some of those strategies so that if they need help, they can get that from you. So the more opportunities that we talk with our kids talk with each other, our kids talk in groups, the better our classrooms are going to be. And not just me talking and they're going to be receptacles of knowledge, but really they have to be actively engaged in our classroom discussions.
And I will just add that wait time is probably the hardest thing because if you think you're waiting a long time, I'm telling you, 10 seconds can seem like 2 minutes. So I have actually timed myself, and I used to have a little timer, so I would actually wait. And it would seem like forever, and I would realize, oh, it's only been 15 seconds. So it does help to kind of think about how long you are actually waiting.
Yes, that's a good challenge to any paraprofessional or teacher. I agree. We're going to watch in the next one, Terry Scott, who is really the researcher behind opportunities to respond. He found that the more teachers ask opportunities to respond or give students ask questions about the content, and he gives feedback, the higher their academic scores were. The same schools with the same social economic background, the same kind of students, the same everything. The only thing different in a higher performing school is that their teachers have more opportunities to respond with the content with the students. So really, they're so important. So we're going to see him, and we talked about we need 3 per minute is basically what we're trying to go for. So we're going to show you what it looks like to get a couple opportunities to respond in, I think it's a minute. We're going to watch this quick video, and then we're going to talk about it.
Who remembers what page we were on with fractions yesterday when we stopped? Yeah, what?
246.
246 is right. Could I see everybody turn to page 246, please? That's where we're going to start today. When you get to page 246, I'd like you to look for the part that says improper fractions. That's where we left off. Put your finger on it where it says improper fractions, please. Improper fractions, got your finger there? Okay, so if you see there, the step says how to divide. So I want you to look at this first one up here on the board. Raise your hand if you think you know the answer to this one. Yeah, what do you think the answer is to this one?
2.
She says that it can be simplified to 2. Raise your green card if you agree with her. Lots of agreement. I agree also. It is 2. Very good. That's exactly the way you do it. You divide. So if she's right and we divide, then what I'd like you to do is write down the answer to this one on your paper real quick. Okay, so notice that some were to the group, some were to individual. The data that we have right now says results look good when you have a mixture of about 4 or 5 groups per every one individual.
All right, so those are some opportunities to respond. I'm sure as paraprofessionals that you are in classrooms and you see teachers engaging with students, that's what they are. Opportunities to respond is when you're asking a question about the content, giving students time to all participate. Sometimes one person answers the question, sometimes they talk to each other, sometimes they all write something down. But anytime they're talking about the content and they're able to interact with the teacher, that is an opportunity to respond. Some whole group and some single, like he said. So we have a lot of videos and resources on here to see what they look like. And later on, we can keep going, Nick, to show you different ways if you are interested in that. But there's a lot of different ways. And these are strategies that your teachers may use in their classroom. There are nonverbal, like we said, and nonverbal is, I think these are where maybe the paraprofessional would be really good to help with some of those students. If they don't have guided notes and you think that that might be something that would help your students, that would be something that maybe you can think about asking the teacher. Stop and jot is when students are just stopping and jotting and thinking about what happened in the paragraph. I had a student that was able to read, but she did not really understand what she just read. So at the end of every paragraph, I would have a post-it. I would put a post-it, and she would have to jot whatever she just read, like a summary of it or a picture of it. She had a little higher needs, so she would jot something like 1 or 2 words about what the main idea was or what the person was about or what it was, because if she got too far, she did not remember what it was. So I had to do that at every part. So that's a good strategy. I think that that paras could help with that as well. Hand signals, like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do you understand? Does everybody understand? Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's a quick one. Response cards. These are really good for student multilingual learners too, like red and green, or anybody that needs help. Like Gail said, sometimes students in middle school don't always want to say I need help, but maybe if you have a response card that has the red over it, that means I need help real quick. In green, you're good to go. So I would sometimes I would use those as well. Whiteboards are really great for kids, kids that need extra help, and that maybe if we're going to do a math problem, everybody has to do it on their whiteboard. I want them all to raise their whiteboard up so I can see who has the answer, who does not answer. So that gives me feedback. I know who knows the answers and I know who doesn't. Those are nonverbal strategies that you could add to your students to have some practice and some help with that. Verbal is think, pair, share. That would be when your teacher says, okay, let's stop and think and let's talk to each other really quick about something. So we're going to talk about a topic or we're going to share something out. So that's really helpful for students that like to share a lot and sometimes they share off topic. So if you can get more times when they can share with each other, that is very helpful. And just making sure that I have wait time to wait everybody to answer before I let them share with each other. Whip around, we have a video on here, but really that's one that everybody in the whole class gets to answer a question. I'm going to say, all right, we're going to talk about the President's Day. Everybody first is going to have to we're going to whip around the room and just tell me a president. We're going to start off with that. It has a lot of answers and everybody gets their answer to my teacher. Corral is when everybody answers at the same time. I can say, what page are we on? Page 74. Class, and they say page 74. Responsive is you're going to claw and they're going to say something back. Snowball and stations and four corners and gallery are also team and group. These are different things that you could do in classrooms. stations are probably, everybody knows what stations are most of the time, that there's different stations, and the paraprofessional is great with this one because there could be a couple different skills going on, and maybe you guys can go to one station and help out with the station. I think that's a great one to do. But there's some that have 4 corners. You could have answer questions on each of the corners, and all the kids have to go to a different corner and answer and ask a question and walk around. That's a gallery walk. There's all the different times. We don't have too much time, but we have a lot of resources for you. If you have one that you use, you can put it in your notes. If you have one that you want me to explain, you can put that in the chat. But we do have actual videos of these so that you can see how they are used in your classroom. But anytime maybe your teacher uses some of these, you see these, your engagement probably goes up when your teacher uses some of these if you're working with a teacher. Or if you're working a resource classroom, maybe you can try some of these things, or you can ask the teacher if she's ever heard of one of these things, and maybe you can try something for something different. Does anybody else have anything to say about those?
I just wanted to add that I think sometimes some work I see paras do that is really just really amazing is when students are put into a team or group situation, which is a great choice by the teacher. So let's say the teacher puts the students in stations or encourages them to do a gallery walk. These are great team or group OTRs, but you might find that some of your students that you work with a little more specifically, they might not be able to engage in the exact same way in these groups. So don't be shy about engaging some of those nonverbal or verbal OTRs to make sure that your students can be most successful in that group area. So while you might not be the teacher choosing the group activity, you are a para who can say, well, before we jump into this group activity, let's write down 3 things we remember from the model that we don't want to forget when we get to the group setting. Or before we write that down on the group paper, let's make sure that, the 3 members of the group have time to chat about it before we write down what's happening. So make sure you recognize that your strength as a para is being able to pull some of these engagement strategies in so our students feel like they are belonging and that they're very valued members of that team or group activity.
Thank you. And I think there is some just resources for videos that you can watch later about these, which yes, right here. So these are great training videos. They're about 7 minutes, and they're showing all these things because you're probably like, if you haven't heard some of these, you might have seen them, but maybe you didn't know the words or the names, but they have a video and they actually show you what it looks like in the classroom. So if you'd like to, they're 7 minutes each. They're great, but we're not doing it right now. We don't have time, but it is a great resource for you to see it in action. These are some more engagement strategies, and I like this poster. And you could actually even, I don't know, print it off or have it in your classroom, or think about your students that you have in your class and say, oh, I bet my student is really good at maybe they would be good at debating. Maybe they would be good at, like, they always like are debating me, so maybe they would be good about debating the opposite side of of a topic or something like that. Or maybe they're really into music. I wonder if they could make a song about this topic. And I bet if you went and asked your teacher, she would probably say that's a really cool idea. Like, if you could think of something that would get them engaged, and these are great ideas that you can just try it. We're at the end of, the school's almost over, and we have not that much time left. And now is time that my son always has like a little bit more like projects due at the end of class, like the school. And so maybe some things like this would be kind of fun to see and to show your teachers if you think your students might like them. But I do like some of these engagement strategies. It just gives you kind of an idea, a 1-page thing that has different ideas for you to try it, and thinking about your learner, like what kinds of things do you think that they would get engaged about? So these are just some ideas. Anybody else Niki, do you have anything about that? Or okay. And please put in the chat if you've seen anything. But so how can paras implement OTRs? So again, consulting with our teacher, I had 3 wonderful paras that I worked with on Fridays. We would work together, and I would say, what do you think about this? And how comfortable do you feel about running this group? And we would try to think outside the box. So I think that is really great for you to help implement the opportunities to respond, offer choices, like I said, with that slide before. Plan together, consider barriers like I talked about. If the learning objective is for the students to summarize a chapter, is it okay for my student to just make a video about the summarizing the chapter? They're still doing it. they're not writing it, but the standard doesn't say write. It just says the learning objective would be just to summarize the chapter. So if my student is able to tell me what happened in that book in a different way, is that okay? Like, I think that would be a great ask to the teacher. Like, can we do this differently? Choose carefully, try just different things to see how you can engage your students. And then how will you know if it's working? Well, we're going to see how many OTRs we do now in our classroom, and then we're going to try to increase that. So how can we, actively engage them? We're going to see if it's working or not. The pairs, you're going to know. You're gonna know that if your students are more engaged, if they're more willing to try different work, to try harder work. So really, it's really helpful for you all to work as a team to increase those opportunities to respond. And things to consider in the group. So we talked about these groups, the instructional grouping arrangements. When you have groups in your classroom, I did a couple of different things to make sure that my students knew their roles and responsibilities in group work. And Niki said, like, the pairs, you probably help with the stations, or you get to help with the groups. But I would have each student have a different color marker, and then they would have to have, so I knew that, there's 4 different color markers in every group. I would have to have 2 responses in each color so that I knew that everybody gave me their group effort, or I would sometimes have them initial after they would do it on their worksheet or the poster or whatever we were doing. So you need to make sure that no student can hide. You have to have, everybody has to have a role, responsibility. They all need to know what they're supposed to be doing. All students participating in groups are held accountable for their work, which, like I said, I like to use different color markers. Sometimes people use pennies or Skittles, and they would have to say, like, you have to give me your 2 cents, and then they could eat their Skittles after the 2 times that they were involved in whatever the group activity was. But we just make sure that we're varying our group. We're making sure that we are having flexible grouping and opportunities for students, like we talked about, to set goals. Did our group make it to our group project? Were we all hard workers? I used to have reflection sheets at the end of group projects, and I would say, like, rate myself as a worker in the group. How did I do? What's my strength? What do I need to work on? Again, I taught in middle school, but it really helped. Like, was I a good group work member today? What does that mean to be a good group member? What's my expectation? And how could I do better next time? And then I would have the group rate them each other, and then I'd have them rate themselves as a group too. So we did a lot of reflection on that. So that's something to consider when you are making groups, to how they feel about their group work, how their whole group is working together, because we have to increase those problem solving skills with each other. That's so helpful. And after, to increase that motivation. And like I said, they're going to want to be at school because their group is going to depend on them. Everybody has a role and everybody has a responsibility in their group. So that's something to help increase that engagement in the classrooms.
I just wanted to add that I think so often I see paras, especially with my gen ed background, paras who would want to say, let me just take my students with IEPs, and I'm going to pull them over here. But our students then become more reliant on, say, a paraprofessional or the teacher and an adult, and they lose some of this persistence that they would gain from knowing that they have a role in the group, that kids are counting on them, that they're interacting with each other in those ways. So do make sure that you're utilizing those flexible groups that Alana mentioned, making sure that our students are all, mixed up in the classroom so that they can learn their own strengths and weaknesses and the strengths and weaknesses of others, and really have that sense of belonging in the classroom and understand all that they bring to it.
That's a great point. They do work a lot, really well together, learn a lot from each other.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All
All right.
right.
I think
Sarah, are you ready for me to take over?
I think this is up now. It's up to Niki. Thanks. And then please, if you have any questions or thoughts in the chat, I will read that too.
So thank you to Gail and Alana for getting us started today. I do want to add, really, we've looked at 2 really big practices today. We're about to dig a little deeper into effective feedback, but we started off talking about student engagement, the why engagement is so important. And then Alana brought us into the what, how we're actually going to do this in our classroom, what it looks like for paras, and how we can make it happen for our students. And this is a second practice that I'd like to encourage you to try in your work as a paraprofessional this week. And it has to do with how we provide effective feedback for our students. Because as paras, you are oftentimes the closest one to those students and able to provide feedback to more students more often. So making sure we remember that effective feedback increases student engagement and their academic achievement. So you're going to see those decreased negative behaviors and increased academic achievement, but we see that when the feedback is effective. So we want to really focus on what that means over the next few slides. Effective feedback is more positive than negative. We generally aim for a ratio of about 3 to 1 on that. So 3 positive interactions, 3 positive pieces of feedback to the student for every 1 negative. Earlier, Alana mentioned the term errorless learning. That errorless learning allows us to put students in a place where we feel really certain that they're going to get it right. So it doesn't mean that every student in the classroom always knows the answer and will get it right. It's that as teachers and paraprofessionals, we phrase a question in a way that makes them know exactly what to say. So we break it into such small chunks where if we say something like, there are 3 types of engagement, and the ones we did at the beginning, we said behavioral, cognitive, and emotional. And when we have those 3 types of engagement, then we say, so how many types was that? And I might still have my 3 fingers up because I'm asking the students to give me 3. And then when they all say it, I can say, great job. There are 3 types of engagement for our students. So I'm able to put them in a place where they're interacting, but their first opportunities to try it a little bit. The first question I ask, I feel certain they're all going to get it right. Not always just giving them an answer, but making sure that during that model, they've had those positive interactions, because I'm building that ratio slowly to make sure that if they do make a mistake or do have that where I have to give them a correction or a redirection, that means that they have felt success already before that negative piece ever has to happen. We want to offer instructive feedback for our students. That means that we're going to keep it positive, but we're going to propel the learning forward. So if I said something like, these are the 3 types of engagement, and maybe a student says, yes, there are 3 types of engagement, and makes a mistake in one of the types while they're describing it, then I'm able to say, you're right about the 3 types of engagement. You got these 2, but that 3rd one, remember the name of that 3rd one is cognitive, and cognitive means the way we're thinking about the topic. And so I'm able to provide that positive, but propel into the new learning as well. So it gives me that positive to build on and create that instruction that's built into the feedback as well. And just remember, Gail has said this already, and I think Alana has as well, success brings more success. So our students, part of the morale and motivation piece at the beginning, our students were less likely to kind of talk to one another. It was more individualized. The more they're having that interaction and it's happening positively, they're going to push out into it more often. So you might notice that these OTRs or that these feedback conversations you're having with your students start off a little clunky because they maybe aren't used to it. But as it increases, as they have more practice, success brings that success. And so we want to make sure we're working within that ratio in order to help build that confidence and efficacy with our students in that conversation. I have a quick video that I'd like to show about the importance of feedback and this ratio as well. So I'll show it while you're watching. Just ask yourself how this could apply to your particular work with students. So pay attention to what's happening in the video, and then think to yourself. I'll ask you to share in the chat when it's over how your students could respond to this, or what might happen if you try some of these things.
Research has shown that giving good feedback to students is one of the most powerful ways teachers can improve learning. Feedback allows students to know where and how they can improve by allowing them to confirm, correct, fine-tune or restructure their knowledge or beliefs. Effective feedback can also boost students' motivation to improve and can help them to develop more effective learning strategies and skills, such as self-regulation, goal setting, task planning, monitoring and reflection. There are 3 stages to feedback. Feed up, making the learning goals clear to students. Feedback, monitoring and assessing students' progress towards the goal. And feed forward, giving students direction on where to go next in their learning, Feedback operates on 3 different levels. Task level or product feedback, which focuses on students' performance on a task. Task level feedback is best provided immediately after a student completes an activity. For example, "That's correct. Could you include more information about why Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia?" While important, task level feedback is not the most powerful type of feedback because students typically cannot use the information to improve other tasks. Process level feedback looks at how a student has completed a task. It fosters a deeper understanding of how we learn, and students should be able to transfer these learning strategies to other tasks. An example of process level feedback is, "You might find it easier to punctuate your writing if you read it aloud to a partner." It's best to wait some time after the task before giving process level feedback, as students are more likely to be able to reflect on their learning. Personal level feedback is directed to the individual and is not task related. For example, "That's an intelligent response. Well done." It is the least effective level of feedback, as it directs attention away from the task and learning, and research suggests that feedback that focuses on the self can result in students fearing making mistakes. Here are some tips on how to give better feedback. Reduce the number of pieces of work you assess so you can focus on providing high-quality feedback. Avoid value judgments or advice, just report on what is being assessed. Create an environment that welcomes errors and corrective feedback. Attribute success to effort in order to increase motivation. For more information and practical examples of how you can improve feedback in your classroom, check out the resources on our website.
All right, so I'm hoping that you'll take a moment in the chat and share with me what are some things you noticed about the feedback, about those feedback practices, and how would your students respond to some of those? And I'll take the advice of my colleagues Alana and Gail, and I'll make sure I wait you out. I'll give you some really time to kind of think about what reactions your students would have and how you could try some of these. All right. And while I see some of you getting typing there, I want to add a piece about my own experience with feedback as a teacher. I know that when I was teaching writing to 6th graders, I found early on in my experience teaching writing to 6th graders that it would almost bother me a little bit not to mark all of their all of the errors that were made in their writing, and so I would mark it all. But then what I found long term is that it wouldn't improve them as writers. If I set out to, say, do a descriptive piece and I really wanted to focus on their word choice, and all of my mini lessons were about word choice, my feedback also had to be about word choice. It had to really comment on and highlight the words they used that were so unique and interesting, making sure that the feedback was about what I was really looking for. Because those students who I had who were struggling, if they got a paperback that was covered in red commas, they've always known they've struggled with commas, and so it was a frustrating experience for them, even if they were really good at word choice. I really had to hold back and focus on the one skill I was teaching there, because while the other things were helpful, I was taking away their sense of kind of success there and not building that persistence. Thank you to those of you who started filling in the chat. Alana said, "I like how it is about effort and specific to a skill, not person specific." That is really important, making sure that our students know that we are focused on that skill. And it's not, I always think of my daughter when I think about that point of feedback, because my daughter she had a teacher who called her smarty pants. She was so smart. You're a little smarty pants. And the teacher meant it as a compliment, but my daughter, it just infuriated her. Like, "I know I'm smart. You don't have to say it out loud. Tell me about what I was actually doing." And she also said the teacher made it sound as if her pants were smart and not her. So She did not appreciate that compliment. Kelly shared that she's given personal feedback, telling them they did a great job on something, but maybe not realizing what it was that they did a great job on, or being specific and helping them to grow. That might be the next step. You did a really great job on these 3 math problems. Now, what would it look like if this had a negative number? And that gives them that next piece. So don't be afraid to say good job, but add good job and good job. How about kind of gearing them to that, feed them forward to that next step that the video highlighted. Thank you, Kelly. Maggie shared, I like the feed up idea. Students like to hear what they are doing right before those corrections. Again, that builds that 3-to-1 ratio that we were discussing on the previous slide. It helps us create those positive connections with students prior to having to have that, maybe not always negative in a rude way, but having to have that formative and instructional feedback opportunities. Maggie also shared that using minimal words is a good one too. A small amount of feedback to focus on one time. So again, you can't fix all their commas and all their punctuation errors all at once. Instead, we have to focus on the skill we've been teaching and celebrate the wins with that skill, so that they have that time to feel that positive energy, but also that they can focus just on that one thing without that feeling of overstimulation, or sometimes it even builds confusion or gets in the way of our student motivation to keep trying something new. Great. Thank you all for sharing and for interacting in the chat. I appreciate your interaction. Making sure when it comes to feedback, you use feedback to reinforce those expected behaviors. So whether this is academic, if you're asking students to really analyze something. So if your goal is to have them analyze a text in a specific way, making sure that the reinforcement and the feedback you're giving comments on their cognitive process for that. So I noticed that you pulled this key piece of evidence from the text as you analyzed this. That's great. Noticing the positive things that students are doing along the way. That allows you that opportunity to then give them guidance about how to. I noticed you pulled this key piece of evidence from the text. However, how does it fit with the analysis? What section of your analysis would that best fit with? So it gets them to see that what they're doing well, and also see how they can make a small adjustment. We know even as adults that making a small adjustment feels easier, right? It feels we're more willing to be persistent with a small adjustment than, kind of throw it all away and start over, or that's incorrect, those kinds of things. So don't be shy about that. Also making sure that you're fading out your feedback once the skill has been met. We can think back to that prompting ladder from our previous presentation. That prompting ladder showed us we really want to use it like we're afraid of heights. So once students are on track and going, we can then start fading it out to like a good thumbs up, a smile. That's where we can be encouraging them in those less evasive ways. Making sure, and again, paras, this is where you come in handy so much, that immediate feedback. A student is walking into, say, a small group a little nervously, those kinds of things can happen. We want to make sure that feedback is positive in that 3-to-1 ratio, but then also making sure that it's happening more immediately. We don't want them going off into a group and being on the wrong track for a long time before, and then we have to scale it all backwards. We don't want to have to do that. Our students see negative feedback as a punishment in many cases. So just to be aware of this as paraprofessionals, it's typically a stop command. So something like, stop doing that, don't do this, don't do this. We want to make sure that while these things can be delivered in a mild and instructional manner, so it doesn't have to be screaming and yelling, but making sure that when you're giving that stop command, you're also offering the opportunity for, again, that revision. So please, if you, instead of pulling this piece of evidence from the text, what about if we pull a character-based piece of evidence from the text? Or even a kind part of it where we can offer positive and negative I love that you made it back to your seat. Can we now make sure that we, push our chair in or hold our feet still or stop tapping, whatever that behavior that we're trying to avoid is. So making sure that we make it even if we have to offer negative feedback, which is okay, that is correction, but we want to make it instructive and we want to make it specific to the skill that we're working on or working toward. All right, so in true Niki fashion, a lot of these things I've kind of over talked on one slide and then I'll under talk on a slide, sorry. But feedback increases motivation, engagement, and independence. But that independence piece is a lot of times where we have to work on as the adults in the classroom. We want to practice fading those things out. So as a para, asking yourself questions about as a student, if they're hearing your feedback, are they getting good guiding ideas and support, like where am I going, how am I going to get there, and where am I going to next after I learn this. So Alana mentioned earlier that PEMDAS earlier in the training, that order of operations. When we think about that with our students, we ask ourselves, all right, well, we know as adults they have to make it through all of these different steps, and we know why. Do our students understand that why part of it? Do they know what the steps are? Do they know how they're going to use that next in, say, algebra class or in all of these other things that they're doing? So considering that for your students and then asking the next question. If we're wondering where do we go next and you're going through that order of operations, asking them, gosh, what does come after parentheses, so that they are guided to that next piece until they're ready to guide themselves and have it are more fluent in the task itself. Our feedback is student-centered, corrective, and instructive. So we want to make sure, I often hear sometimes like, oh, that's just a silly question. Let's skip that one. No, let's try it. Let's see how we can, let's see how we would attack that question, those kinds of things. So making sure we're focusing it on not the textbook or the text. We're going to look at the student-centered version of it and making sure we're focusing on how our students are performing in that piece. Some levels of feedback that the video highlighted were that task, process, and task level, process level, and personal level feedback. And keep in mind that all of these things will lead us to some of that self-regulation that we want from our students. If they're getting that process feedback, they're learning the cognitive part, like they're learning the thinking behind their thinking. I know I'll be able to get this order of operations part correct because I understand the process. Keeping in mind that the ineffective feedback is that personal level, where if it's just about the person, and it's that evaluative feedback that's about that smarty pants example like I gave with my daughter. So we want to try to avoid some of those because that's the feedback that gets shredded up and ignored as part of it. All right, so wrapping up here. Oh, sorry, I don't think I realized that these were individual. Sorry about that. I encourage you to keep an eye on these as far as just a checklist on how you do feedback with your students. So I encourage you to maybe print this slide and ask yourself, maybe keep tallies of how you're giving feedback with your students, just to making sure that you're using that effective piece, making sure it's goal directed and it's very clear and specific. So these are the things that we've been talking about all along. It's just that this slide gives you the opportunity to kind of track how you're using feedback and then to ask questions if you have them. Don't forget that even after our series ends, you're welcome to reach out to us at the TA Center to talk about how some of these things went and to let us know if you need additional assistance in any of these areas. This one, I hope that you don't use it as a tally sheet, but making sure you recognize that that ineffective feedback of that person-focused, the hints, the answer rhymes with heaven and the kids get to 7. We want to avoid those kinds of things. We want to focus on the process our students are taking and how they're getting there so that we can do that. I always think about the part with the report card or test grades. We know that paras, you all are on the front line. You're closest to the students most of the time in proximity and oftentimes in relationship. Waiting for the test grade or the report card grade is going to be too far for them, if you're right there with them, really focus on the feedback that you can give them right then in the moment, because that's going to be the most effective for them. All right, so here at the end, we encourage you to make a plan. How can you implement these strategies in your role as a para? Can you offer some of these? How can you make small adjustments when the teacher's teaching the whole group versus when your students are in small group, or even when you're working with them one-on-one? How can you increase opportunities to respond? How can you make small changes to your feedback so that they can be more effective and impactful for your students? And how can you collaborate with others in your building to share this information that you have practiced and learned in today's session? So I encourage you to take the time to make a plan. Again, this slide could be a great checklist if you'd like to make sure that you have that so that you can check off the new things that you are doing in your classroom setting. So as always, we thank you for being here with us today. We have some favorite resources here, and we also have some great resources to give away for you. We do have some paraprofessional handbooks that Gail and Katie are going to manage the giveaway of. But before that, I am going to leave on the screen here for you our evaluation. So please take a moment and scan that QR code on the left side and complete that evaluation, or go to iepta.org/eval to iepta.org/eval to get to the evaluation. Sorry, I can tell there's a black box over the QR code, so I'm trying to move that for you. All right. And then I'm going to leave my slide sharing for right now, but Gail and Katie, do you want to take over and talk about the resources we have to give away?
Okay, so I'll go. Katie just put in the chat, if you would send your mailing address to either myself or Katie, then we will send you the paraprofessional handbook that we have. So yeah, congratulations. Thanks for being here on all these many sessions, and we appreciate that you have spent your time with us. So again, just send your address to either Katie or myself, and we will put this lovely book in the mail for you as a resource that you can keep or share.
If
So-
you're worried about your giving away your home address, you can also share with us your school address, and we'll
Sure.
put your name on it. If we want to, we can send it to your school for you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, whatever address, wherever you want us to send it to you, that's what you should put in. Yeah.
And again, we thank you so much for being here during this series. We hope you've enjoyed it, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can provide services at your district in the future.
Yes, thank you. And you can ask us a question if you want. We're gonna be here for a few minutes, but if you don't have to, if not, you can go. Thank you.